Why are home energy audits important? Well, depending on the source of data you trust, homes use anywhere from 22% to 30% of global total energy. That's a lot of energy. In this video, I'm going to give you an overview of how to go about walking into a home and doing an energy audit of it, showing the occupants how to save money and cut their greenhouse gas emissions. I'm Bruce Rouse from the Sustainability Education Academy. But first off, what is a home energy audit? A home energy audit basically has one aim: to show the occupants of the home what they need to do to reduce energy consumption in the home, and to provide a business case around that by quantifying how much the energy savings measures will cost and how much money will be saved each year. Think of it as a blueprint for saving energy in the home. One of the ways I like to visualize energy usage is to go back to ancient times, where energy was primarily provided by slaves. Think of slaves in Roman times rowing a ship, such as might be captured in an Asterix comic. But nowadays, we use much more energy than we used in ancient times. In fact, if we took some slaves from ancient times and had them pedaling away to power our homes, how many slaves would we need to power an average home? Well, my back of the envelope calculation, taking into account total global energy use, homes using 22% of their energy, taking an estimate of the number of homes in the world and the amount of power we could reasonably expect a slave to produce with humane working week of just 40 hours a week, plus lunch break. This indicates that we would need around 90 slaves to provide the energy used by just one average global home. 90 slaves! The ancients would be amazed at the insane amounts of energy to maintain our modern lifestyles. Homes use a lot of energy. And the thing is, a lot of that energy is wasted. Now, a home energy audit can identify how to reduce that wastage. Home energy audits can help occupants save money and also reduce their carbon footprint, reduce the greenhouse gas emissions associated with generating the energy that powers the home. Home energy audits help occupants become better stewards of the Earth's energy resources. So how's a home energy audit undertaken? Well, an advisor undertaking a home energy audit has four main tasks. First, to motivate home occupants to take action to reduce their energy usage. Second, to understand how and when the home uses energy. Third, to advise the occupants on what they can do at little or no cost to reduce energy consumption. And fourth, to advise of longer-term investments that the homeowner might take to further reduce energy usage. Now, much of the training available on home energy auditing is focused on that fourth item. But since I believe that every energy audit should provide a tangible benefit to the occupants, and some occupants simply may not have the money or be willing to make longer-term investments, in this video, I'm going to briefly touch on all four. So to motivate home occupants to take action to reduce their energy consumption, you, as the advisor, need to be energized and motivated yourself. And how can you get to that point? You should have absolute belief that any home can reduce its energy consumption. Will you do it in your own home and you save more than you could imagine? Whether you're renting or whether you own your home, I'm confident that most people, probably including you, can halve their own energy usage by following the advice in this video. And when you do that, well, your self-confidence and energy levels will magnify, and then it will be easier for you to infect the home occupants, the people who engage you, with the same enthusiasm. And this is no idle challenge. I'm saying this very confidently because I've done it. My home has 4 people in it, more than the 2-point-something that the average household does here in Australia. The home size isn't small, it's about average. And yet it uses just 1/4 of the energy use of the average household in my area. 1/4. If I can do it, you can as well. So now let's look at how to understand how and when the home uses energy. To do this, you need to do 2 things. Firstly, you need to get 12 months, but preferably 2 years of energy bills, and you need to analyze them. Get the total them up, get the annual total. Examine the bills. Look at, is there any seasonality in the energy use? Figure out what tariff they're paying for energy. If they're using both electricity and gas, get the gas bills and the electricity bills. Convert them all to common units if you like, just so you've got a feel for the overall energy usage. Look at what months of the year energy use is highest. If the climate is cold, Generally, usage will be much higher in winter than in summer. Some bills may have two account codes on the bill, which can be really handy. One might be for what is called a controlled load and the other for a non-controlled load. Typically, controlled loads are those loads which are designed to operate overnight, starting about 11 p.m. By finding out what those controlled loads are, you can get a more granular understanding where energy is used. For example, I just recently looked at an energy bill for a house which had a controlled load, and I was able to identify that it was just the hot water, an electric hot water unit, that was using the energy on that controlled load circuit. Thus, I knew exactly how much energy they used for hot water and exactly how much it cost. This meant I could do the calculations around the cost benefit of replacing the electrical resistive hot water system with a heat pump and be very confident in my calculations. And in this case, in my state, there's a good subsidy available for heat pumps, and it was actually an attractive investment for this home. You can find some benchmark data to compare the home with. Here in Australia, for example, 16 kilowatt hours per day for a home is pretty typical for energy usage, depending on climate. You may also be able to get what we call interval data, which is data at intervals of maybe an hour, half hour, available through the energy retailer, and then you can plot graphs and see the time of day the energy is used. All this is useful for getting a feeling for how and when a home uses energy. And the second thing you need to do is develop an energy use breakdown of where energy is used. Now, this is a bit of work, but the major energy uses in homes will be either hot or cold climates that are particularly hot or particularly cold will be for heating and cooling. In other climates which might be more moderate, the other major users will be hot water. They can use quite a lot of energy and will use a lot more than a fridge. And of course, there's the fridge. And you've got lighting. Now, with LED lighting, of course, lighting energy use has come down in most homes due to the switch to LED. Then you've got the kitchen equipment, stoves, ovens, range hoods, maybe a dishwasher. They can use quite a bit of energy as well. If you look at cooking equipment, it depends on how often the occupants cook at home and what food they like to cook. If the oven is used a lot, for example, when cooking a meal, well, that will use a lot more energy than, say, just cooking on the stovetop. Now, surprisingly, you can actually get into more energy efficient cookware as well. We've got induction stoves, which tend to be more energy efficient than gas, for example, and traditional electric resistive. So in many opportunities, there's actually opportunities for lots and lots of stuff to become more efficient. Then we have everything that plugs in. Now, for some homes, these plug loads could be quite large energy users. You've got a TV, a big older TV that's running most of the time, or even quite a new modern TV, which they seem to get bigger and bigger and bigger. They'll use quite a lot of energy. You've also got computer loads plugged in. You've got networking equipment and routers and stuff that's plugged in, Wi-Fi access points. You've got phone chargers and other chargers that get plugged in. Maybe you've got a sound system. You've got any games that might be plugged in. There might be an Xbox or something plugged in like that. Then you've got the laundry in the washing machine, and maybe in some cold climates you might have a dryer as well, a clothes dryer. And so across homes you can see that there's quite a variety of energy uses. So an energy use breakdown is basically a simple pie graph which shows how much energy is used for each type of equipment. So you might have a pie graph which shows, we're using 50% for heating and then using so much for hot water and so on. To build the graph, for every single item that uses the energy in the home, you need to estimate its annual energy usage. Then you total up all those estimates and compare them with the bill, and you've got your pie graph. So how do you determine how much an individual item of equipment, how much energy an individual item of equipment uses? Well, it's just determined by three factors that you multiply together. Firstly, you look for the nameplate power draw. Then you look for the hours of operation. And then you look for what we call the load factor. You multiply those three together. Now, the load factor is the percentage of the full power draw that the load is drawing on average. Here's a simple example. A light bulb will have a wattage marked on it. Now, for a light bulb, the load factor is 1 because it's either on or off. Unless you've got dimming on that circuit, but let's ignore dimming for the moment. Let's just assume the light bulb is either on or off. Then you'd ask the occupants of the home, well, how often do you use this light? How many hours does it run a week, for example? And then you can figure out the hours of the year that it runs a year. The weekly hours you multiply by 52. And then you calculate the total annual energy use of the light bulb by multiplying by its nameplate power draw by the load factor by the hours of operation. For example, you might have an LED bulb, it's got a wattage of 10 watts, with a load factor of 1, it's either on or off. And they use it for around about, let's say, 20 hours a week. That's about 1,000 hours a year. So over a year, that will use 10 times 1 times 1,000 is 10,000 watt hours of electricity a year, or 10 kilowatt hours. Another load could be an air conditioner. You look at the nameplate and it shows an energy input of 1 kilowatt, or a power input of 1 kilowatt. You estimate a load factor of 0.3, say. That number's a bit of experience involved in coming with that, up with that. Could vary, it could be 0.4, maybe 0.5, 0.6. This example, let's say it's 0.3. And you find out that it's used for about 40 hours a week, or 2,000 hours a year. Well, then that will give you an annual energy usage of 1 kilowatt times 0.3, the load factor, times 2,000 hours a year, is 600 kilowatt hours. Now, basically, you do this for all the loads. You total them up, and then you compare them with the bills, the annual total for the bills. Probably it'll be different. So then you've got to go back and adjust the hours and the load factors. Ask some more questions, adjust it till you get them roughly balanced, and then you can build a pie graph just by categorizing the loads into different categories. Now, this is super useful. It's a bit of work, but then you know what the large energy users are. And for a commercial industrial energy audit, which is my main background, it's super important that you do this. Now, it helps us identify where we need to focus attention on to maximize savings. You've got to apply the 80-20 rule and zoom in and identify what are the largest energy users, the 20% of equipment that accounts for 80% of energy usage. Now, typically, as I've already mentioned, it's going to be the heating and cooling and the hot water. And then if they've got a pool pump, well, that's a real energy monster. That'll use a lot of energy. If they do a lot of clothes washing and drying, that might be up there as well. Now let's look at advising the occupants what they can do at little or no cost to save energy. The first 5 years of my life, there's no running hot water. For the first 12 years of my life, we only had electricity for just a few hours a day. I grew up learning how to be energy frugal. You'll actually find it might be good for their physical health, depending on their age, and possibly they'll enjoy the variability of the seasons a bit more. Rooms don't need to be at the temperature range of 22 to 24 degrees C all the time. With a fan in the room and in light clothing, you can still be comfortable at 27 degrees Celsius. And with warm clothes on and a blanket over your legs, and you're sitting down at your desk, you probably don't need heating when it's 15 degrees Celsius inside. Below that you might, but you can probably survive at 15. So I believe a tremendous amount of energy can be saved in the average home, adding up to hundreds of dollars a year, perhaps thousands of dollars, just by choosing to use less energy and changing habits a bit. That's the key reason why my home uses 1/4 of the energy use of the average household, despite having more people in it than the average household. So here are ways that you can choose to use less energy at little or no cost, and you've got to advise your clients to do this. Dress warmer in winter and lighter in summer. In summer, use a low-speed personal fan if it's too hot. Yeah. In windows which get direct sunlight coming through in the winter, keep the curtains wide open when the sun is around. Homemade curtains, my wife made our curtains, or you can buy inexpensive curtains with thermal lining that run from the floor all the way to the ceiling. Moving behind the curtains can be really good at keeping heat in and cold out. Or in winter, in summer, keeping heat out and cold in. Now, some appliances don't use much energy when they're plugged in and turned off at the switch on the appliance, but other appliances, for example, like my washing machine, it uses quite a bit. So we just turn it off at the wall all the time. Another thing to do, if you're not using it, turn it off. Turn off the lights, turn off the TV, turn off the radio, turn off the computer stuff that you're not using. Now, this is related to energy, though you may not think so at first. Put flow restrictors on taps to reduce the flow rates down to 4 litres a minute. So how do you figure this out? We'll just grab a 1 litre jug and a stopwatch, put on the tap, turn the tap on, and time how long it takes to fill. For example, if the jug fills up in 6 seconds, the flow rate is 10 litres a minute. Now you should put flow restrictors on all taps, and they're easy. You just unscrew the thing off the end of the tap and screw them back on, and they're inexpensive. Put flow restrictors on all your taps, except for perhaps the kitchen sink if you do the dishes by hand, and the laundry if you wash clothes by hand. This will save you both hot and cold water and the energy used to heat up hot water. So there's the energy connection. You use less hot water, you're going to save energy on energy used to heat up hot water. Continuing that, you should put in low flow shower heads and take shorter showers. Now, this is not glamorous or exciting, and it's definitely low tech, but it does work. Believe me, it really works. Now let's look at the final item, which is advising of longer-term investments to reduce home energy usage. Now, as I've mentioned several times, heating and cooling are typically the largest energy users. Now, the more extreme the climate, the faster investments to reduce energy and cooling energy use will pay off. So I'm going to start with these. But first, let's step back. Heat is transferred in three ways, and you need to understand this so you can kind of identify what you need to do to reduce heat transfer in the house. The first way is radiation. This is where there's a direct line of sight between a hot object and a cold object. So, for example, if there's a direct line of sight from a hot object like the sun to you, you'll feel that radiant heat warming you up. And that line of sight can be through glass. For example, when I was writing this, it's winter, it's cold outside, maybe 13 degrees outside, and it was really cozy in my little office because I've got had the sun directly coming through the window onto my back, keeping me nice and warm. It's beautiful. Now that's radiant heat transfer. Now radiant heat can go the other way as well. You've got a window with the curtains open at night time and it's cold outside. The heat in the house will be radiating outside and up into space. And if it's a cloudless night, a lot of heat can be radiated up into space. So how do we manage this radiant heat transfer? Well, in a hot climate, you want to reduce radiant heat gain. One thing that works really well, especially in sunny, hot climates, is to paint the roof of the house with a cool roof or radiation reflecting paint. These are special paints designed to reflect radiation back out into space. And you can use awnings with heat reflective surfaces on them to stop direct sunlight coming in through windows. Or you can use reflective films on the windows themselves, but it's kind of best to get the sun off the windows in the first case, if that's possible. In colder climates, you want to prevent the heat in the house from radiating outside. So you keep the curtains closed at night time. Now, a second form of heat transfer is conduction. This is typically what bulk insulation stops, and bulk insulation is really effective at stopping the conduction of heat. Think of bats and things like that, like insulation bats, which can be quite thick, made from rock wool or other materials. These can be retrofitted to a home if there isn't much insulation in there. Double or triple glazing of windows reduces the conductive transfer of heat. Thermally lined curtains that run down to the floor and up to the roof to prevent air bypassing them also reduce conductive heat transfer. Can keep heat out in summer and in winter. Then the third major way of heat transfer is through convection, which is air movement. Air movement is where you get cold air from outside coming into the house in winter, or hot air in summer coming into the house. And you stop convection by blocking the gaps that cause air to flow from outside to inside. Close the windows, block the gaps. Put weather strips under doors and things like that. Now, once you understand that there's three methods of heat transfer, you can try to figure out which ones are most significant in a particular house. Now, this is where it gets a bit tricky because it depends on the house, the orientation, the climate zone, and many factors. And there's a bit of maths in figuring out the savings, and I'm not going to go into it because there's a lot of detail involved. And you can end up by using some fairly complicated instruments like a blower door, which basically pressurizes the house to identify how susceptible it is to air leakage, for example. And you can use an infrared camera alongside that to identify where the leakage is coming from. If you've got a large temperature difference of at least 10 degrees Celsius between inside and outside, you can use infrared cameras to give you an indication of where heat is being conducted through different surfaces. And often this will tell you where to insulate and seal. But there's a lot of complexity around some of these measures that I'm not going to get into. And you've got to really watch out also for the dangers involved in sealing a house too well, because it can be trapping moisture inside the house, which causes mold. And to deal with that, you've got things like heat recovery ventilation, which is where you have a heat exchanger and mechanical ventilation in the house. But it's getting a bit too complicated for this introductory video. But there's some of the things that you could be doing to help manage heat transfer in and out of the house. These measures reduce the need for heating and cooling. To provide the heating and cooling more efficiently, you can look to fans for cooling or high efficiency air conditioners. And for heating, you can look at high efficiency like split system heat pumps, either wall, like you could get if your climate is both hot and cold, hot in summer, cold in winter, you could use a reverse cycle split system, a high efficiency split system, to cool pretty efficiently and to heat efficiently in winter. Now, for hot water, you should first look to reducing the demand for hot water by using flow restrictors and low flow shower heads. Then you can look at installing solar hot water or a heat pump. Now, I've been using solar hot water now for about 25 years. Basically, I don't need any boosting for about 6 months a year. In other words, it's just pure solar energy providing my hot water. Over winter, I need supplementary heating for about 6 months a year. And I need some boosting of the water temperature to get it up to a safe temperature, which is 60 degrees Celsius or higher, to prevent Legionnaire's disease. So a hot water heat pump will use, depending on climate, about a half to 1/3 of the energy of an electric resistive hot water system and about a quarter of the energy usage of a gas hot water heater. So there's big savings there. If you have to use a clothes dryer, try to get a heat pump dryer. It's be a lot more efficient than just a straight electric dryer. Or better yet, go back to one of those low-cost measures, which is what I do. And I've got a clothesline outside. I hang my clothes outside to dry. Now to fridges. Fridge efficiency just keeps improving. You could replace that 20-year-old fridge with a more efficient fridge and probably use half the energy use. So how do you do the cost-benefit analysis for these upgrades? So I'm just going to give you the example of a fridge. You need to figure out how much energy the old equipment uses a year, and you've did that earlier energy use breakdown, which would tell you. Then you need to figure out how much the new equipment uses based on nameplate data, similar hours of operation, similar load factor, and the savings of the difference. And then you apply the tariff shown on the energy bill. So the annual energy savings in energy units times the tariff, dollars per energy unit, dollars per kilowatt hour of its electricity, is basically the dollar value of savings that you can achieve over a year. So for example, if I went from a fridge that used, say, 600 kilowatt hours a year, it's a pretty old fridge, 25-year-old fridge, to a new one that uses, say, 250 kilowatt hours a year, that's a 350 kilowatt hour a year saving. Now, if I was only paying 20 cents per kilowatt hour, 350 times 20 is $70 a year. Not that much. If the new fridge costs, say, $800, well, it's not a very attractive investment proposition. It's got a payback of maybe 11 to 12 years. The home occupants may not do that. On the other hand, if the tariff was a bit higher, or if the old fridge used a bit more, so let's say I've got a really old fridge that uses 850 kilowatt hours a year. It's a big fridge. They decide they don't need such a big fridge. I can downsize a bit. And let's say the tariff was 40 cents a year, and they go down to a 250 kilowatt hour a year fridge. That's 600 kilowatt hours a year saved. 600 kilowatt hours times 40 cents is $240 a year. And gosh, if that new fridge only costs $800, well, that's a payback of less than 4 years. It's probably a pretty smart investment. Now, other large users may be plug loads. This is where you just buy a new equipment to replace that plug load. So if you're buying something new, just look for an Energy Star label or some other sort of energy rating. They're very common. If you don't have it, look up one on a website for a country that does have it, like US EPA Energy Star. Many devices have these energy ratings on them, and you just got to buy one which is more efficient. Now, generally, new equipment is more efficient. Now, the other advice I can give you around replacing equipment is always questioning the size of the equipment. Why do you need something so big? Why do you need a huge TV? For example, it's just simple physics. There's a lot of marketing now around, you've got to get a bigger TV. Well, a large TV is going to use more LEDs, which is going to use more energy to provide the light for the TV. It's just basic physics. The bigger it is, the more light you need, the more electricity you need. You just use common sense sometimes to identify these savings opportunities. A smaller, high-efficiency TV will use less energy than a high-efficiency large TV. Encourage those who are advising to start to think this way. How can you conserve energy and not just be efficient with it? So I want to wrap up this quick introductory video now to home energy auditing. Firstly, if you aspire to be a home energy auditor, start by doing an energy audit of your own home. Try to figure out how much you could save and really go for it. Try to halve your energy use. Use your energy bills to track your progress. And here's a quick number to motivate you. Every 200 kilowatt hours you could save a year is equivalent to one less slave from ancient times having to toil away to maintain your modern lifestyle. How many slaves could you liberate? If you want to become a commercial or industrial energy auditor, a job that maybe ought to pay pretty well, it gets a bit more complicated than this. You'll need to follow a more rigorous process than the one I've just described, and you need to be pretty technically knowledgeable about a lot of subjects. Now, if that's your interest, and if you're as fascinated by energy as I am, I've got the investment grade energy auditor training with links to this at the bottom of this video. And you can take some of the lessons for free. All the best with reducing energy use in your own home and in helping others reduce their home energy usage. Please share this video with others if you found it useful. Thank you.